How to survive in war, survival in the battlefield. That's going to be a topic of this video, reacting to SupervivienciaModerna's How to Survive in War video. By the way, the channel is excellent. SupervivienciaModerna, he's been in Ukraine, I think, like 4 times already. He has footage with a GoPro doing a number of different things, and I think he's now mostly focusing on training, but a lot of great information from his channel. So yeah, I suggest you subscribe, and I'll leave the link there below and support the guy any way you can. So the video is very good. I suggest you go watch it. 16 minutes worth every second. It's maybe not as well organized with some of the topics where he goes back on the same thing, and especially in the first few minutes is in terms of small arms. Probably he got confused, or maybe the way in which he was explaining it. No, it's not small arms. It's not the main thing that causes casualties. As they say in this other video, one of the medics, it's 90% is going to be artillery, explosions, bombs, grenades, crap blowing up. That's what roughly it's 90% of the injured and casualties that they have, and it's usually the same way. It's not that direct gunfire has the most, but I think he's referring to here in terms of body armor, how you want to stay protected with your rifle plates, and this is something you probably know already in terms of not going like sideways, like target shooting. No, you want to keep your chest towards the threat, especially because that plate is going to be keeping you safe as long as it's stopping those projectiles, and the moment you go sideways, they can go through the side and reaching your vitals. So yeah, shooting in that way, keeping that plate forward, and a bunch of other things. Micro terrain, how you always want to be using cover. Camouflage, how it's more important now than ever, especially because of the drones, that sometimes it's simply a very basic drone flying around and a guy with a camera just trying to find you. If camouflage is done correctly, you're a lot more difficult to be detected, and if not, if you screw up, well, you may end up with a little grenade, a little explosive dropping on your head. So micro terrain, he makes great points about how even little things that's just a few inches, and you only notice it if you actually hit the ground and notice those little differences of terrain that can end up saving your life. How the explosion goes upwards, and even when just a few feet away from the explosion, if you are as flat as you can on the ground, that may end up saving your life. So lots of that as well. Sounds, how you learn to distinguish between outgoing and incoming fire. And there's going to be a lot of sounds that you probably want to learn, and mostly through experience of detecting drones when it's one of the planes. I guess it's going to be a point in which you can actually tell what's coming close to you or not. But yeah, pretty important in terms of making. This is a great point that he makes. Bunkers, make doors for your bunkers, because again, drones dropping a grenade on that hole and it ends up killing everyone inside, which could have possibly been prevented by doing even a basic door with a little bit of mesh wire or some camouflage. Shotguns for bringing down drones. He mentions that there's electronic devices that interrupt that signal, which are obviously something super valuable. How there's some that have a lot more range, and those are vehicle mounted, but things that are in the more modern battlefield, which I guess with the war in Ukraine and the use of drones is a lot of stuff to be learned there. Mines, lots regarding mines, walking in the same line. This is a great point, taking the path that is least, taking the path of most resistance, or taking the path where you see the taller grass, or it's just more rubble, or just not as comfortable. Because if you go through the obvious path, that's where the anti-personnel grenades and explosive and other threats are most likely to be. So if you go through the least traveled path, that's gonna be more likely to avoid those explosions. Aircrafts, how you place your body depending on what's attacking you. Lots of this, of staying on the ground, staying underground when you're in buildings, not going to the top floors, and as low as you can get, basically. And there's a lot to be said about that, because a number of the threats and explosions and artillery and whatever is blowing up, the closer you are to the ground, the more likely you are to survive. And the first thing he mentioned is having faith, luck, and yes, but he also makes a great point about there's a lot here that is on you. The more you stay behind cover, the more you stay underground, and of course, at times you cannot do that, but the more the more you persist on keeping yourself safe, and the less permissive you allow yourself to be, the greater your chances of surviving these attacks. 3 vital tips he mentions. The first one is in terms of sending a smaller group for recon before moving more people. He mentions sending 3 or 4, a small team of 3 or 4, and using that so as to have more information, doing that recon before moving. 30 people, larger groups that are more likely to be detected and more likely to be worthy of retaliation. So he makes that first point. Then he talks about the basic training, all too important. Using your weapons, know how to care for it, basic maneuvering and shooting and covering and that sort of stuff. Then he mentions NCOs and leadership, and he makes a great point about leadership being important so as to not let guys become more loose with things such as cover, as camouflage, even stuff like leaving junk around your hiding hole or your bunker or wherever that is. If you don't look after that sort of thing, maybe the guy with a drone says, yes, there's a bunch of crap here and trash. I'm going to be paying more attention to that place. All great stuff. Final point he makes, Faraday cage. These little things may end up saving your life. Why? Because everyone has a phone, and being without a phone doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when you can make it disappear with one of these. And you can make your own Faraday cage. Buy it. Just buy it. It's just a few bucks. Buy it and verify that you're not getting the signal. That's the way you make sure. And in fact, Ukrainians actually nailed a lot of Russians because they found several hundred phones on the same spot. Yeah, the Russians talking back with their families and friends, screwing around on the internet, and they said, oh yeah, there they are. Found a building with a bunch of phone signals that they did not recognize or did not belong to them. Dropped from the HIMARS, dropped a missile on the building, and it was one of the largest casualties the Russians had suffered because they did not have a good control over that. No one, no NCO, no superior was telling guys, hey, stop screwing around, don't have your phones, And again, with phones, it's not just about turning it off, because as you know, even if you turn the phone off, you have to remove the battery, which these days you cannot do. But this thing makes your phone disappear. And it's not just for Russians or Ukrainians. This is for us. This is a great tool to have. And you don't want to leave behind your phone, but you do want to have that ability to make it disappear from the grid. Folks, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, especially in the basic training regarding firearms, self-defense, and that sort of thing, a lot of using guns and covering yourself, it's here in Street Survival Skills, which will be available in the links there below. This is the kind of stuff that you learn in beginners and more intermediate or a little bit of the more advanced classes. Some of these things will be taught, and if you haven't got the training, this probably could be very useful for you. But wrapping this up, I want to mention that from our perspective, in terms of survival, the first thing we talked about when I talked with Selko, who went through the war in the siege, I think he was in Sarajevo as well, is, dude, don't even be there. If you don't have to be there, don't be there. And especially if your family has no purpose of being there, get them out of there. Now, this is true for survival in the battlefield, and it may be that you just waited too long, or they just closed the borders, or whatever reason, or you just choose to stay and fight. But if you're looking specifically at how to survive is not being in the war in the first place. And that's a whole other topic that I've covered here before and will cover again in future videos. But I guess that's a great point. You know, if you do not have to be there, don't get trapped in a place you're not supposed to be. And certainly don't allow your family to end up there. Guys, see you in the next video. Take care.